closest approximation we ever had to a free society in this country was unquestionably in the 19th and early 20th century, a period about which myth has become more dominant than reality. It was a period of the greatest progress in the well-being of the ordinary man that the world has ever seen. And yet, it has become enshrined in myth as a period when robber barons were going around the country grinding the poor people under their heels out of sheer malice. The interesting question is, what produced the shift from that 19th century relatively free society to our present 48% socialist society? What produced the shift? It was not produced by evil people for evil purposes. There was no conspiracy. What produced the shift, in my opinion, was an unholy coalition of well-meaning people seeking to do good and of special interests trying to use the power of government to promote their own particular immediate interests, reinforced by a change in political philosophy, from an emphasis on individual responsibility to an emphasis on social responsibility. That shift started in the 19th century, but it did not really take off until the New Deal in the 1930s. And in the past 50 years, it has gone very far. In 1928, total government spending at all levels was 10% of the national income, 2/3 state and local. The federal government spent 3%. The National Association of Manufacturers would never have contemplated meeting in Washington. Today, government spending at all levels is 40% of our national income, and 2/3 of that is federal spending. That's only one index, not necessarily even the most important. The question is, where do we go from here? Can we reverse that process? Many people will say, well, you can't reverse the process. Technological change, the development of a more complex and sophisticated economy requires big government. That is another of those myths that need to be punctured. There are many unfavorable signs about which way we are moving. It is far easier to enact laws than it is to repeal them. The very people who oppose the enactment of a law will ultimately end up opposing its repeal, because once you enact the law, people get special vested interest in what's going on, not least of all the bureaucrats who enforce the laws. Again, you have the problem of the political power of special interests. Now, it used to be anybody who talked along these lines 50 years ago would have talked of the special interests as being primarily business. But that's no longer the case. Today, increasingly, governmental officials who are desperate to keep their jobs and their influence are a major special interest preventing an elimination of bad programs and a reduction in the role of government. In California and in Michigan and many other states, but California and Michigan are the two cases I know about personally, we had attempts to get constitutional amendments adopted limiting government spending, the spending of the state governments in those cases. Who defeated them? The most important single force defeating them was in Michigan, the Michigan Education Association, and in California, its counterpart. The bureaucrats in the educational establishment. Now, again, they're not doing it out of evil motives. Every individual has the capacity to rationalize his own interest as being the national interest. That goes for you and me, and let's never forget it. So that they weren't doing it out of I'm not attributing it to malice or anything else, but they now are in a position where they are a very strong special interest. But let me turn to this audience, to business. I cannot complain as a believer in a free enterprise society in which human progress comes through the attempt by individuals to better their own lives, through Adam Smith's famous invisible hand. I cannot complain if business pursues its self-interest rationally and in an informed way. That is the main motive of every system. But I think I can complain, and I am impressed with the extent to which business, when it turns to matters of public policy, is short-sighted and operates against its own interests. I have been struck time and again by the contrast. A businessman dealing with his own firm will look 30, 40 years ahead. He will make long-range plans. He will not conduct his business in terms of what's going to happen in the next six months. But when he comes to the area of public policy, well, 6 months is a long time ahead to look. You and I can do our share as individuals to persuade ourselves and our fellow citizens that this is a road to a collectivist state, that this is a road which, if long continued, will destroy both our prosperity and our liberty.